This episode contains specific and graphic information about a crime. Please be advised.
I never thought that my little boy was going to be murdered in his English class. And I guarantee you they didn't think it was going to happen in Uvalde or Virginia Tech or Sandy Hook or any of the other tragedies. There's complacency and there's pushback, but that's why it takes good leaders. The first thing they should be prioritizing is school safety. And if they don't, wish them a good day and go find someone else who prioritizes this issue.
Welcome to True Crime Prevention, the podcast that melds true crime with real solutions. Let's expose how all crime starts the same way, with a chance. Today, we won't give it a chance. I'm Paul Del Ponte, and I work with McGruff the Crime Dog. Thank you for joining us. We're very pleased today that we have with us Max Schachter. Max was the father of a young man who went to Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, which as soon as I say that, I think most of our listeners and viewers know exactly what we're going to be talking about. But we're going to be talking about it in a little bit of a different context because Max has sort of turned tragedy into advocacy on a wide range of things that when you talk about school shootings, a lot of people often overlook. So we're delighted Max can join us today and delighted for all the work you've been doing since that horrific day back in 2018. So thank you again.
Absolutely.
So I want to start, as soon as I say Parkland, you have that flashback to watching the news clips and where you were that day. And it's just one of those tragic events that unfortunately is ingrained in many of our memories. But your son, Alex, sadly was one of the victims. I'd like to spend a few minutes. Just tell us about Alex. I mean, he seemed like a great kid in many ways. And I think it's important to remember people as the people they were. So I think it'd be wonderful to tell us a little bit about Alex.
Thanks, Paul. Obviously, that's the most important thing to me is keeping Alex's memory alive. Alex was a wonderful kid, just a sweetheart and someone that you would want your son or daughter to be best friends with. Alex had always had a cute little smile on his face, and he had cute little dimples, and he loved Nutella crepes. And
Good choice.
yeah, exactly. His smile and his happy demeanor kind of masked the tragedy that Alex had in his life. Alex was murdered when he was only 14 years old when a school mass murderer walked into his high school with an assault rifle and killed 16 others in the deadliest high school shooting in U.S. history. But when Alex was a little boy, he lost his mother. My wife passed away when he was just 4, and I couldn't wake her up. She had a heart malformation. And I thought that was the hardest time of my life, being a single father, a widower, and having to raise 2 little boys on my own. And then I met a wonderful woman several years later whose husband had died of a heart attack when he was only 39. She lived in New York. She had 2 beautiful little girls. And so I had to make the hard decision. Do I take the boys and move to New York, or does she take the girls and move to Florida? And we thought that we could have a beautiful life in Florida. And that's what she did. She moved to Florida, and we moved to Parkland because, we thought that it was a wonderful little city and a safe city. And then 10 years later, after we moved to Parkland, we sent Alex to high school, and he never comes home again. So my mission in life right now is to tell Alex's story and the story of Parkland, because unfortunately we know that the next school mass murderer is already out there. The next gun that he's going to use is already out there.
Yeah.
And if you haven't had this happen in your community, you just been lucky. So Florida gets it. And after this happened, and there have been monumental change across the country after Parkland. And I travel the country right now, and I keynote a lot of school safety conferences and law enforcement conferences. And people all the time tell me, oh, we did this after Parkland, and we did that after Parkland. And Florida did that as well. We passed the most significant school safety bill that Florida's ever passed. And then we didn't stop. And so we've passed a school safety bill every year after Parkland. And we have kept our foot on the pedal because we understand that the most important thing is that if your kids and your staff don't make it home to their families every day, nothing else matters. It doesn't matter
Exactly.
what they got on
Exactly.
their report card or their
Right.
English paper or their SAT. We've got to prioritize school safety so that because you can't teach dead kids.
And that really is what crime prevention is all about. As you pointed out, that gun has probably already been sold. That next mass murderer is already out there. But how do we keep ourselves safe? And we think of a school and we assume it's safe. I often use the analogy 100 years ago, we had a big problem with school fires and communities rallied around that. And as a result, there were all sorts of fire codes in school buildings for drills with
Mhm.
the fire department. First, I want to get into how you overcame such a tragedy
Yeah.
after having lived previously a personal tragedy, and one that I cannot imagine, losing a child. And then you turn that and you are traveling the country. You've got a busy speaking schedule. You're doing this. What was there something in your mind that just one day, like a light bulb went on and said, I've got to do this?
It was more grief and pain and frustration that after 9/11 we made the airport safe, we created the TSA, and now we don't have terrorist attacks in airports. And after the Oklahoma City bombing, we made the federal building safe, and now we don't have attacks at courthouses. Since Parkland, children and teachers continue to be murdered in their classrooms. So it was that confusion, and I have three other kids that I wanted to make sure that nothing happened to them. And so that's what drove me every day to start this advocacy work. And very quickly after Parkland, I started making trips to DC, and I worked with President Trump, and then I worked with President Biden, and now I work with the current administration to make schools safer. So we don't have a choice. As a parent, I had no idea that Alex was going to school with such a violent individual. And so that's the reason my wife and I created Safe Schools for Alex. And now we created the first of its kind school safety dashboard. So parents can go online and type in any school. Actually, we started in just Florida, but now we've expanded to the whole country. So if you go to schoolsafetydashboard.org, you can look up your state, look up your school, look up your school district, and see exactly what every school is reporting in regards to the number of incidents of bullying, the number of weapons that are coming into your school, assaults, fights, and then discipline. So in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, and we're using data to make schools safer at Safe Schools for Alex.
We will have an episode guide, which will have the dashboard and other information in it. And for our viewers and listeners, while you're at it, if you can click like and subscribe, so you make sure you catch all our weekly episodes with important information. And again, this podcast is both talking about the crime and what happened, as well as what you can do, because there is much we can do. Let's talk about some of the low-hanging fruit that communities are not taking advantage of, where they could be making schools safer. What are a couple things schools could start doing right away?
So there's a lot. For instance, in Florida, I would use Florida as a model. Florida is the leader in school safety across the country. And so we have, to give you an example, we have an armed officer in every K through 12 school throughout the state. We have armed guardians as well. We have mental health coordinators in every school district. We have threat assessment coordinators in every district and at the state level. We have panic buttons. Every teacher has a panic button now. We have passed Alyssa's law, and we have access control laws. So now every teacher has to teach behind a locked door. A lot of this came out of Parkland, and so the Parkland murderer walked through an unlocked, unstaffed gate to get on campus. And so now that doesn't happen anymore. In Uvalde, the Uvalde shooter walked through an open door, an unlocked classroom, and then killed all of those children in Uvalde. So a lot of this came out of Parkland, and now we are implementing school safety measures to make sure that it never happens again.
Because those are basic, simple, easy to do, but unfortunately overlooked. And as you talk to people, as you talk to different schools, are you getting resistance? Are you getting the well, that would never happen in our school, or we don't need that, or what are you hearing?
No, absolutely. We live in the greatest country in the world, and we don't live in a country that is being attacked every day or is under threat. So, as Americans, we're very reactionary, and if you haven't been affected by gun violence, then there is a good chance that there's a lot of complacency. So, absolutely, it's unfortunate, but that's why I do what I do. That's why I bring my story, Alex's story, and the story of Parkland to, as many communities as I'm invited into to talk about what happens when you let complacency permeate and take over and you're not vigilant. And so that's what happened here in Parkland. I never thought, obviously, that my little boy was going to be murdered in his English class. And I guarantee you they didn't think it was going to happen in Uvalde or Virginia Tech or Sandy Hook or any of the other tragedies. So absolutely there's complacency and there's pushback, but that's why it takes good leaders. When you choose a superintendent, the first thing they should be prioritizing is school safety. And if they don't, wish them a good day and go find someone else who prioritizes this issue, because ultimately it's a culture issue. And if if the leaders of your community do not prioritize this issue, then you're SOL, you're shit out of luck. And it's upsetting when I go to school safety conferences and there are no superintendents at the conferences and it's just like the lower level folks. I mean, that's inexcusable. But that's a sign that they're not prioritizing this issue. And we know, we've seen this movie before. We know what happens when you don't prioritize school safety and you have a Parkland. And that's what happened to Marjory Stoneman Douglas. The principal was disinterested and uninvolved in the threat assessment process, and he just shoved everything under the rug.
And, ignoring a problem doesn't make it go away. And, that's a lesson that often people learn the hard way, as I'm sure that superintendent did. But in terms of your work to avoid that, being ahead of it, being 2 steps ahead of things, you had mentioned mental health counseling. Tell us a little bit more about that component in Florida and what is missing in most schools.
Well, coming out of COVID, a lot of these kids, were not in school, they were not socializing, and they were just on their phones every day. So that led to a lot of self-harm, kids trying to hurt themselves and commit suicide. And, we're just now digging out from that. So in Florida and in a bunch of other states, we've banned cell phones in schools. That has led to an increase in academics and a decrease in violence in schools. And so the Parkland murder had more mental health treatment than anyone, but quantity is not the same thing as quality. And there was nobody managing his care. And so that's why in Florida, we have prioritized mental health. And so we have a mental health coordinator that is coordinating mental health throughout every district. But mental health without physical security and school safety is not a good recipe either, because mental health issues, it's not like you broke your leg and you're in a cast and you're going to be fine, or you have a lumpectomy and they take out the lump and then you're fine. Mental health is a lifelong journey. It's not like you go get one session with a counselor and you're fixed. It's really, mental health is really a black hole, and it's hard and it's difficult, and it sometimes stays with people for a long, long time. So you've got to be doing both. You've got to be, that's why in Florida we focus on the prevention side and on the response and on the recovery. And so on the prevention side, the best tool we have is threat management, and that's what Florida's done. And then on the response side, we have a lot of measures implemented on the response side as well. And then we've learned a lot on the recovery side and unification and reunification.
In terms of the physical layout of the schools, and is that getting much focus? I mean, most schools are already constructed, but we talk at the National Crime Prevention Council in terms of designing out crime. Are there things you can do that will inherently make a school safer besides locks, pathways, exits, entrances, all those kinds of things?
Crime prevention through environmental design, SEPTED.
Yeah.
So absolutely. cutting back shrubbery, so people can't hide, making sure that every school has a visitor vestibule and a single point of entry is important, and educating everybody. In Florida, where it's law that you have to do active shooter drills in schools, and so that's important. And so these are life lessons that this is the world we live in right now, and unfortunately there's active shooters all over the place. So it's important that we teach kids, stop the bleed. We taught them back in long decades ago, stop, drop, and roll. And as you mentioned,
Hmm.
we haven't had any kid die in a fire because of the fire drills and the fire codes that we have implemented. But that's why we need to also establish national school safety standards. And so when you're building a new school, the school safety chief should be involved, and it should not just be left up to the architects. You've got to involve the law enforcement community, make sure that the experts on school safety are consulted, and everybody needs to be working together.
Hmm.
So it's all important.
Have you talked to the accreditation boards? Each school needs to be accredited by a regional board that controls that, and wanted to see if that's an avenue for advocacy.
I think it's a good idea. I have not. If you can connect me to the accreditation boards, that would be great. It's a great
We will
idea.
work on that. So we like to take action, and we've got to give more focus to this issue. It is, like I said, too many times when people talk about a school shooting, the debate boils down into, do we ban this weapon? Do we ban that weapon? It never goes deeper than that. That's an important debate to have, but there's more. It needs to be a broader debate. It needs to be a broader community involvement. It's what are some of the early warning signs with a student? How does the school react to that? And you mentioned the shooter was receiving treatment, had a long history, but how does the community come together to deal with that in a way that is effective?
Well, I mean, so in Pennsylvania, they have these CATO teams, these community threat teams. And so in Florida, we're doing threat management at the school level. In Pennsylvania, they're doing it at the county level. And so you've got the whole county involved, and really stakeholders from all these different entities involved. And so that's really what I hope that we will migrate towards, because after a kid brings a gun to school, they're getting expelled, or after they graduate or age out of school, what happens? So it's important to have it at the community level, getting everybody involved, teaching stakeholders how to recognize warning signs and concerning behavior, and all working together.
Right. And one of the things we see at National Crime Prevention Council is an overlap. If you go from bullying, cyberbullying, in-person bullying, hate, other things sort of manifest themselves and unfortunately often result in violent behavior of one shape or another. And, you know, there's people don't often want to stop things before they get too bad. What have you learned about, not waiting?
Well, and this is a common problem with law enforcement, is that they don't have probable cause to take action. But if you're waiting for probable cause, it's probably too late. And so that's why having a threat management unit is important, because it's these warning signs that need to be brought to the attention of the unit, the threat management unit, to really get these to address these concerning behavior before it becomes critical, before the law enforcement has probable cause to arrest the individual, because by then it's too late. They've committed some act of violence, or done something, brought a gun to school. It's really too late then. So we're trying to get it way left of bang before that
Right.
happens.
Right. Which is critical, because it is, yes, you can wait till probable cause. You can wait until handcuffs are around somebody, but you haven't prevented the crime. You haven't prevented the tragedy.
And it's about mitigation, it's about intervention. So if a kid, does something, if they make a threat online, and then you suspend a kid, okay, or you're expelling a kid, the kid's coming back into school. So, how are you managing that threat and making sure that they get off their pathway to violence? Because the Parkland murder is really the poster child for this, for those individuals and those school districts who think that, oh, we suspended the kid or we expelled the kid, we're good. And it also goes for law enforcement, for the agencies that say, oh, well, we arrested that individual or we put him in a mental
Right.
health hold. We're good. You're not good. The Parkland murderer came back to attack the school after he had been gone for an entire year.
Right.
So you've got to manage these threats and make sure that they're off their pathway to violence, or else you really haven't accomplished anything.
Talking about staying ahead of it, you've created this dashboard. Say I'm a parent and about to move or send my kids off to a new school. I go to this dashboard. What will I learn?
So in Parkland and in most places in the United States, I never got the call from Alex's principal saying, great news, parents, our bullying numbers dropped by 20% this semester. Or parents, we've had 3 more weapons being brought into school this quarter, and we really need you to search the kids' backpacks before they're being brought to school. I never got any kind of that kind of data or information. And parents are really in the dark. They drop their kids off to school and they have no idea what's happening inside the classrooms. And so that's why we created the school safety dashboard. And so for the first time, there are other websites where you can go online. You can look at, graduation rate or how your school did on this English test or that mathematics score, but there's no website where you can go online to look at school safety incidents, the number of incidents of bullying, the number of incidents of weapons coming into your school, the number of sexual assaults, the number of suicides, and the amount of discipline that's happening. So in school suspension, out of school suspension, and expulsions. And so our website, the school safety dashboard, is really a first of its kind where you can go online and rank every school in your district, in your state. You can see where, what's happening everywhere. And so it's really the ultimate resource for parents to see what's happening in their kids' school, and then to use that information to have conversations with administrators, your school board members, your superintendent. And it's also a great place for advocates who want to advocate for more funding. My hope is that we can use data to make schools safer and surge resources to schools that need it most to make schools safer.
And it's also a great segue for parental and community involvement. You look at those numbers and take the next step. Pick up the phone, call the principal. Hey, my son or daughter is going to be a freshman there, and I noticed your bullying rates seem a little high. I think number one, the principal is probably going to be a little surprised by that a parent is asking that question, and you're going to get attention. And everybody likes someone who sees a problem and offers to help fix it. And, saying, what can I do? And, how can you get involved with the PTA? What steps you can take? And I think a lot of times what you find out is the higher level of engagement around an issue brings awareness to it. And when there is awareness, problems seem to dissipate more. It's very simple. One of the basic safety tips McGruff started his career with 40 years ago. Don't leave your porch light on. Lights make burglars nervous. It's, a lot of times when you see bullying, making sure that the child has the skills to deal with that. We have resources on our website. You have resources. There are a lot of resources out there. Make sure the children are aware, have the conversation. What are some things that parents can do with information once you arm them?
Yeah. And, of course, I built the website for parents, but it's also a great resource for school board members and for superintendents and for principals. So I'm sure every principal has their own data, but they don't know if their numbers are good or bad or high or low until you're able to compare it to every other school in your district or every other school in the state. And that's what the dashboard really gives you, that kind of visibility. You're able to, look at and say, oh my God, this school is in the top 10 in bullying or, or in out of school suspensions or in violence. And so what I hope is that will help school districts make intelligent decisions about where resources go, where funding goes, and also I'm hoping that at the state level, the state board of education and the department and the office of safe schools in your state will look at this data and surge resources to schools that need it most.
And there is power in the individual and there is power in the community. The more people start talking about these issues, the more attention they will get. And every school, every district has a variety of elected positions. And if somebody wants to start getting involved in running for office, school board is a good place to start. And people running for school board these days, they tend to address the most controversial, divisive issues. They try to get attention, but school safety is something everyone can agree on. And wouldn't it be great to start seeing more candidates pop up for local school board races just talking about school safety?
Yeah, and that's why we created this dashboard. It's to really educate and shine a spotlight, because sunlight is the best disinfectant. And I had no idea that Alex was going to school with a violent individual. But parents have a right to know what's happening in their school, and that's why we created the dashboard. And so, for instance, if you look at the California data, it just shows like a bunch of zeros. So, like if you look at the largest school district in the United States, LA Unified, there's just a bunch of zeros there. So, I'm hoping that shining a bright spotlight on that issue in California will encourage transparency and accuracy in reporting, because you can't manage what you don't measure, and parents have a right to know what's happening.
Absolutely. So if you're listening out there, LA School Board, let's get that fixed. I think part of it too is you mentioned working with the police. I think too often what we see is agencies, schools, police departments, everybody tends to stay in their own silo. They don't communicate with each other. I think that's another area where, when we talk about schools, active shooter drills in a school, one of our recommendations is, well, the police need to be involved. It just can't be the school alone. It's got to be, you need multiple components. You need to make sure that the EMT folks are also aware that there are systems in place so that these very good response mechanisms that we set up in the time of need kick in. That was, I think, a painful lesson from Uvalde learned. And, a lot of times too, we don't take advantage of the opportunities to learn that after a tragedy happens, we don't do a good job of doing the proper risk assessment. Everybody's worried that fingers going to get pointed at them. They're going to lose their job. They're going to get sued, all these other things. But that is no excuse for not understanding and finding out information that will make you smarter the next time.
And unfortunately, in law enforcement, there are 18,000 law enforcement agencies. And so there are a lot of lessons learned from Parkland and from a lot of these horrible tragedies. And one of them is that we find that a lot of these law enforcement agencies just do not work well together, and it's upsetting. And so that's why we need to involve the public and the community, and get these agencies to work. I mean, there's some communities that really work well together, and the school districts work well with law enforcement, but there are others where they don't get along, and that's a public safety issue, and your ego is not your amigo. So, uh, and especially when we're talking about saving lives, everybody needs to put their ego aside and do what's best for school safety, and to make sure that when these incidents happen, everybody gets along and they don't give a shit about who takes credit or who gets in front of the microphone.
Exactly. Leave the check the ego at the door, and we'd be better off on so many levels for sure. National response you're getting. I know you spend a lot of time traveling, speaking. Do you come back feeling more frustrated or more hopeful when you go into a new community and start talking about school safety?
So more has happened since Parkland than prior to any other tragedy, or than after any other tragedy. So I am hopeful and pleased that we have made some progress, but there is a lot more to do. And just last month, when I was in DC, I met with General Bondi, and Pam has a close attachment to
Sure.
Parkland. She was the attorney general during the Parkland school shooting. She was in the room with most of the families when we were told that our loved ones were murdered at Marjory Stoneman Douglas. So I know that she cares about this issue. I know the president does. When I worked with him when he was in office the first time, he created the school safety clearinghouse, and so I know that they care about this issue, and so I'm hoping that we're going to make a lot more progress over the course of his term. So I'm going to be back in DC in 2 weeks again to try to get members of Congress to focus on this issue and to pass some common sense school safety legislation. And that's the reason we created the School Safety Policy Center. So for anybody that is watching this, and if there are any school board members or state legislators that want to help pass common sense school safety legislation at the district level or at the state level, I encourage them to reach out to me through Safe Schools for Alex. And we've assembled really top notch group of subject matter experts who have done this in Florida, who have passed, school safety legislation that are making schools safer in Florida. And we want to help other states replicate what Florida's done to make sure this never happens again.
Good. That's obviously great resources and great work. In terms of somebody listening out there who, like I said, it's hard not to have heard of these issues. It's hard but it's easy to go on with your day-to-day life. We're all busy. We're
Yeah.
moving, taking the kids here and there, picking up groceries, all the things that suck up our time in a day. What's the advice for someone who's currently uninvolved?
Well, the first thing I would do is to check out our school safety dashboard. That's really the ultimate resource for parents to get information about what's happening in their schools. Most likely, they're not going to get the information from their principals about what's happening after they drop their kids off, and so that's the reason we created the school safety dashboard. And then we also have resources on our website on safeschoolsforalex.org about what are the top 10 things that schools should be doing to make their schools safer. And so that's a great resource as well. I will also flag for your audience schoolsafety.gov. Is the current school safety clearinghouse that I work with President Trump to create. It's really the government's clearinghouse on school safety best practices. That's a great resource as well. And then, if there are others that are advocates and they want to, make their school district safer, or they're do things at the state level, I encourage them to reach out to me, and I'll be glad to help them.
One of the things we like to believe and operate under the principle is everybody's an advocate. Everybody can speak up. You have that power. You have that ability. And, are you going to see dramatic change overnight? The world is not going to automatically change unless we point people in the right direction. And little steps matter. Picking up the call to your principal, school board member, or even just a teacher when you drop them off. I mean, I've encountered in the course of having kids in school and my own schooling, sometimes you get a good principal, sometimes you don't. You gotta work on those who say, no, not at my school. No, we don't have that problem here. Okay, we want to make sure you don't tomorrow as well. That's what you're doing. What level of engagement? Somebody out there, they want to get involved. They go to your website. They just start with a local school. Should they start with the school board?
Yeah.
All the
It's your
above.
individual. I mean, if you have a kid in school or not, it's starting at the local school and letting administration know. Sit down, have a conversation with the principal, and let them know that school safety is the most important thing that you're worried about, and that if the kids and the staff don't make it home to their families every day, nothing else matters. And so letting them know, letting your state reps know, and then your members of Congress and your school board members, ask them, what are you doing to make our school safer? And people know if it's just a bunch of BS, and there's a lot of school districts that are really doing a great job and focusing on this issue. We've learned a lot after Parkland. So do you have an armed officer on campus? What threat assessment model are you using? One of the big problems right now is that we're seeing that you've got school districts that are using threat assessment models, but everybody's using a different model. And in Florida, we have it's state law. Every school district must be using the same model, the same process, the same instrument, because if we have kids that are struggling and we put a school safety monitoring plan in place, and then they go and change districts, and then that district is using something totally different, and the papers don't transfer, so the new school district has no idea what happened in the old school district. The plans that they put in place to help the kid don't transfer. It's just a mess. So I hope that as we move along here, states will put more emphasis on this and do what Florida's done, which is mandate that every state has to have a unified process, be using the same paperwork. And so everybody's working on off the same music. And then Florida will be the first state in the country to have an online portal. So every threat assessment will be uploaded into that portal, because what happens is kids are changing districts, and then the new district has no idea what happened, what that kid was like in the previous district. That's what happened in Georgia at the Appalachia High School shooting. They weren't sharing information. That's a big problem in school districts. And then do you have if God forbid something does happen, do you have a panic button? Are you communicating that with law enforcement? There are so many things. We're using ballistic film, active shooter drills. Is that mandated? Are you teaching all of that to the kids and the staff about what to do in an event of an emergency?
Absolutely. It needs to be comprehensive. It needs to be front of mind. I think it is a pre-K, not just through 12th grade, but beyond colleges, trade schools, and others. We talk about Virginia Tech and all the other problems, as well as the safety and support mechanisms. A lot of time parents sends their kid off to college, and we want to believe things are automatically safe, but nothing in this world is automatic unless you make it.
There's a lot of evil in this world.
Right.
Don't hold it against me, but we don't live in Kansas anymore, and so it's a dangerous world out there. There's a lot of evil out there. And we live in a wonderful, wonderful country, but you gotta, when kids go to school, the most important thing is for a parent knowing that the administration's main goal is focused on making sure that they come home. And so we need to make sure that we don't have bad actors coming onto campus. And so what are you doing to make sure that when my kid walks through that door, that nobody bad is getting in there, and that the kids are not bringing guns to school? What are we doing to reduce that? And then to educate them, kids need to know how to be able to handle rejection and frustration. Are we giving them the tools so that they can deal with rejection? They don't let these grievances build up inside of them, and then they have easy access to weapons and they can get them on campus easily. So it's really a holistic thing.
Very well. Well, we are delighted you have chosen this path of advocacy. Sorry for the tragedy that got you here, but the hopeful news for people is we can learn and we can change. And it is Safe Schools for Alex, Max Schachter. We will have information in our resource guides. Don't forget, click like and subscribe. Join us every week as we take on a different area, a different focus. But the main part is you, the listener, the viewer, can get involved. There's something that you can do. It's an easy step that will all make us safer. And as McGruff says, that can help take a bite out of crime. Max, any last minute thoughts, bring words that you have?
No, I really enjoyed being with you, Paul. Thank you for focusing on this important issue, and I'll be glad to partner with you anytime.
Thank you again for joining us. And thank you all out there for listening.
That's an easy way to take a bite out of crime.